I was brought up in a church-going family. On my mother's side of the family, there were 3 generations of clergy. My grandfather, my great-grandfather, and my great-great-grandfather were all Anglican ministers. As I was growing up, I'd never really met any other Catholics, and this didn't really change until I went to university.
And it was only when we moved to the UK, I realized how much the faith, or the impact of the faith has with me and my relationship with God.
I first heard the call of God when I was 12, I think. It was my confirmation as an Anglican, and the bishop said in his address, I remember it well, "Be a good soldier of Jesus Christ." And I remember promising God that day that I would try and do that.
So I went off to university and I worked a little bit as well, and kept asking that question of what the Lord wanted for me.
But all this time it was always lodged at the back of my head, well, Patrick, maybe could there be something as you having a potential vocation to the priesthood? And there was a gentle pressure there that I felt was coming from God, and that pressure became maybe more and more intense over the years.
I started studying the writings of John Henry Newman, among other things, and this introduced me to a whole new world.
So when I went to university, I got very involved in the Anglican group in the university, and the chaplain there one day tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Have you thought about offering yourself for the priesthood?"
A few years later, my spiritual director came to the point and said, "Francis, either you jump off the diving board and apply to the diocese to become a seminarian, or you come off the diving board and go and do something else."
When I moved here to the UK and I met the parish priest, Father Michael Johnson, and he had approached me and said, "Oh, have you considered priesthood? I think you would make a wonderful priest." And I laughed, knowing full well my heart had been yearning for something like that.
When I was 28, I nearly entered seminary, but that coincided with me getting a job as an auctioneer, something that I always dreamed of. I told God, I said, well, just let me do that for 3-4 years. And then those 4 years became 8 years became 15 became 20.
One evening I got back from my work to my flat, and I felt that God was calling me to consider the possibility of priesthood. I had thought about the priesthood before in my life, many years before, but on this particular occasion it seemed that God was speaking to me in a new way.
I think the vocation has probably always been there, but my answer and my willingness to discern it has come at a late stage.
Of course, there was always that question, is God really calling me? So I went to see my college principal and told him about my doubts, and he talked very well to me, but then I said, well, I've got one question. Why does God want me to be a priest? He said, oh, that's easy, he said. You see, God knows you aren't holy enough to stay a layman. Become a priest to grow in holiness. Well, not a bad call, is it?
Priesthood for me is walking joyfully in the footsteps of Christ. And that's mainly by looking at the example of other priests around me. That is actually what has inspired me, is the example of other priests.
I've been inspired by the many good, faithful, holy priests who I've met and encountered over these many years. I came to live and work at Westminster Cathedral. I saw there the priests in their human form, their most normal.
When I see them, you think like, what is that thing that they've got that I don't have? Or why are they so happy? Or why do they have this inner peace, even in the midst of sometimes very difficult situation?
I saw their extraordinary work done in so many ordinary situations.
Here I had come to a small little village community, and they had thrown their arms, around me and accepted me within a few weeks.
I was looking through a Facebook page of all things. A friend of mine had posted a Vocations video on Facebook, and it was an American bishop speaking about vocations to the religious life and to the priesthood. And he said these words: if you feel that God might be calling you to a vocation to the holy priesthood or the consecrated life in the church, know this: you owe it to yourself and you owe it to God to explore that possible vocation. Well, those words hit me like a thunderbolt. I felt that American bishop was talking directly to me. I felt when I went to pray in a church that it was always the Catholic Church that I was attracted to. I always felt that there was a presence in these churches. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And of course it was the presence of Christ in the Eucharist drawing me in.
Those moments of being face to face with Jesus, one to one, listening to him. And those moments, I'm on fire with that love. And it's because of that love that I know that God has a plan for my life, a vocation. And so I'm here to discern what that is.
If you ask me what were my great influences, I'd have to tell you that they were, first of all, just the Catholic culture. I just loved that we knew where we were going, and we were going into the heart of God. I'd say the other thing that influenced me a lot was Our Lady here, behind me, Our Lady of Walsingham. She was very important to me, and I went to Walsingham from the age of 11, year on year on year.
And I took myself off to a Catholic monastery where I made a retreat for about 10 days. And after talking to one of the monks, I knew what God was asking of me. Within a few months of that retreat, I had been received into the Catholic Church.
My first retreat as a Catholic man was to go to Walsingham and to have a retreat led by our retreat conductor, Father Allen, and he helped us understand where Walsingham had been in this journey of faith. I bless God regularly for the love of Our Lady of Walsingham and all that she did for me.
Everything has challenged me in the sense that, of course, my whole life has changed in a major way. It's a seismic change.
The thought of being a priest for possibly 50 years leaves me wondering, will I be happy all the way through? Will I be able to stick it out?
The home I live in, the bed I sleep in, the food I eat, I see less of my friends, less of my family. I had to give up my dog. I had to go back to studying again here in the classroom in college, so it's a big change.
And yet, when I do meet priests who have been faithful over many years, and I see they're still happy, that does fill me with great confidence.
I remember distinctly over a year ago when we had our first set of exams. I was in a shop and I had to buy a yellow highlighted text marker for the exams, and I really distinctly remember that I stood there in the shop thinking, gosh, am I back to this?
And I was sent to Rome to study philosophy and theology for a few years. But I still wasn't convinced what my vocation was. I wasn't ready to make that final step. So I returned to England, and for the next 11 years, I tried to forget about vocation altogether. Lots of people used to ask me whether I felt I had a vocation to the priesthood, and I just tried to ignore it and put it out of my mind.
But I do try always to live faithfully to the way of the church. I don't try to get trapped in any particular corner or in any particular strand of the church.
I would find it, difficult some weeks, but I knew God was always there with me.
And I think as seminarians, we do feel that Christ has got his hand somehow on our shoulder, saying, listen, it'll be fine with all these changes. that come when you have to leave your home to come to seminary, when you have to say goodbye to this, goodbye to that, is that God gives you the graces each step of the way for you to be able to cope and to deal with these things.
Well, it means that we carry on as normal with the routines as best we can. Can't quite do everything we could. The shielding program means that we have to be more careful. But we have Mass every day here in our church, and people come and pray, and I chatter to people, and I can hear people's confessions if they want it, providing we keep the social distances, and ministry continues.
At the beginning of the pandemic, I was on my pastoral placement in a parish, and it was there that I saw the suffering and sadness, the loneliness and the isolation that the parishioners were experiencing, and the great pain of losing loved ones and not being able to visit them in their final hours.
Not being able to go to church, being able to engage with within a community, I found it very strange.
Yet when I speak to friends or talk to parishioners back home in London, you feel there's a lot of sadness out there, a lot of suffering. It's definitely strengthened my resolve as well to continue on my path, because I think this pandemic has put to the fore the needs of the people even more.
We'll look again at how we interact with our parishioners, whether that's on live stream or in person.
The other effect was not being able to receive communion on a Sunday. That to me was quite heartbreaking.
So it's definitely made it more intense, I think. I think it's probably been a very good thing for me, because you have to dig deeper because of it. If God wouldn't want me to do this, I think this would certainly have been a time that I would have felt that.
My motto is, all day to do nothing, but no time to do something. We just have so much time on our hands, but getting structured and getting organised is not easy. When I see men about the priesthood, one of the questions I ask them is this. Well, I say, I've heard what you think about wanting to be a priest, but what does God want? Does he want you to be a priest? Have you asked him?
Over the years, I've discovered that the one thing that is really going to make us happy is following God's plan in our life.
Looking back on it now, at the beginning when I was exploring vocation and when I was talking to my parish priest and to the vocations director, somehow at the beginning I was almost in love and in awe with the idea of the priesthood. But it's a bit like flowers in a vase. It's cut flowers in a vase. They look good for a while, and the flowers look all blossoming and beautiful. But if those flowers are not rooted in rich soil that can only get nurtured by prayer, then those flowers will die very soon. So
Don't panic, but also don't be afraid. It's good to talk to somebody about it.
God will never call you to do anything without giving you all that you need to do it well. Trust.
Take time and reflect on what God is trying to tell you.
God will always direct us and lead us. I know in my own life that those incidents, those people on my way, were ones put there by God.
Trust in the Lord. Do not be afraid to follow him, and he will do great things for you.
It's not an easy process, and it's not a fast process. If anything, this is a long, steady road.
If you are discerning a vocation and you're not sure, I would say to you, go for it.
Because if you do have a spiritual vocation to the holy priesthood, then following this is the one thing that is really going to make you happy and content and full of joy.
every time I pray to the Lord and I ask him for guidance and reassurance, he always has some way of saying to me that this is what he wants me to do.
I guess that would be my bit of advice, is to really be very serious about prayer and deepen your spiritual life.
He is the one who calls. He is the one who provides. Bless him. May he call you, if that is his will, and may you hear his call. Amen.